And welcome to Election Overview, our Thursday edition post-election. Yesterday was the big day. You guys stood in the queues and voted for whomever presidential candidate and National Assembly representative you wanted to. My name is Tonata Kadila. I'm your presenter. I'll be joined by David Bishop later on this morning around roughly past 10 o'clock. He's on Nova 103.5, just having the breakfast show at the moment. But for now, we're taking a look at how it went, sort of in retrospect of yesterday's national elections here in Namibia. I'm joined by future media digital strategist. I hope I got that right, Nrupesh Soni, but he's also so much more. Nrupesh, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you were here. We were all grinding. We were working yesterday, just keeping tabs on what's happening in which part of the country. Let's talk about social media. What role did it play in yesterday's election, especially the impact it had? I mean, we've had access to those who are participating, actively voting, and you got some of that feedback. But what was it like on social media?
It was crazy yesterday. I think it was one of the busiest days in terms of Namibian social media because that was the only avenue, that was the only channel that one could get responses, like feedback from on what's happening in the ground across the 2,400 polling stations.
Yeah.
And I think it did change a lot from the previous elections where social media wasn't used as much. People didn't have a way to immediately give us feedback as media houses, but this time it was all over.
And speaking of feedback, what were some of the common problems that you've picked up? I know you were engaging a lot of people, even on our own platforms. We received, even the radio stations, a lot of feedback. But what was some of the primary issues?
I think the biggest issue was the waiting line.
Yeah.
People have been queuing since midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning in many places, and yet by 1 o'clock in the afternoon they haven't been voting.
Okay.
And that does show a bigger problem there. But I think people were they had nothing else to do while they were in the queue except use social media and tell their experience. And the biggest response was the time it took. Apart from that, there were lots of other smaller problems that they faced. Ballots running out of paper, people saying the security was tough, people were letting others in queue. There are lots of challenges. But at least through social media, we could identify what was the bigger issue on the ground.
You did a survey online. What were some of your findings?
Okay, so we asked through our radio stations and my own personal page, we asked people, how long it took them, what are the challenges faced. And by yesterday evening, in the 3-4 hours we started the survey, and by yesterday evening we had about 1,000 responses. And just sorting through them, identifying the 600-700 responses that we could use, the biggest response was the time. 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours. Somebody said 18 hours, which is not right. And people who have joined like early morning, a couple of them said they joined at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, until 6 o'clock in the evening. They're waiting, and then the ballot papers run out.
Yeah.
Now what do? As much as you really want to vote, you spend 12 hours of the day standing in the sun.
Yeah. So it was the time people stood. Have you found sort of an average time the Namibians actually stood in queues?
So average time across the country is about 6.5 hours.
And how did you work that out?
So we got this, I think it was about 580 responses with time. And then we calculated, I put that all in a sheet, calculated the average, used AI a bit to help with the calculations, and 6.5 hours across the country. But in urban areas, it was a lot more.
Yeah, the population in Windhoek, closer to what?
Closer to about 10 hours in Windhoek and Swakopmund, Walvish Bay.
Yeah.
But in rural areas, it was quite low as well. It was like 2 hours, 3 hours in the north.
It makes sense because the population of Windhoek is nearly 500,000.
Yes.
So if you don't make provision for the ballots, knowing that Finkenstein is how many residents, not supply the ballots.
That was one of the examples. Like many people complained. The first issue started coming in from Finkelstein and Omeya, where they said they ran out of ballot papers. But considering that they recently had a survey, national census, then they had the voter registration, they should have known how many people live where, approximately. According to what we got the feedback, they only took a few hundred ballots to a place like Finkelstein where 3,000 people are registered to vote.
There was a point on a time on social media, someone posted, Windhoek has run out of ballot paper. Let's talk about misinformation and disinformation, because I was at home reading, and I just got home after a long day here yesterday. I'm like, we've run out of ballot papers. So what role does disinformation and misinformation play in an election such as ours?
No, it's a big challenge. Before elections, it was a challenge in campaigning. Now, during elections, it becomes a challenge on, who do you believe? What do you believe? And the fact that ECN kept quiet, in South Africa, for example, their electoral commission was active. Every 1 hour they would release a statement, so people knew what was happening. Here there was just no communication. So the only way we as media house would get real info was from people who follow us or people we know. And I think that's where we can eliminate a lot of the misinformation. But people who share anything. So somebody just writing Windhoek has run out of paper can go viral very quickly. And it takes a long time to disprove that.
And it discourages the electorate from going out last minute to go and vote. Let's talk about the role of the digital role played by politicians pre-elections in terms of their contribution perhaps to even mis and disinformation online. What's your observation been?
In what point of view?
Like the politicians, when they were campaigning, have they perhaps also contributed some way to misinforming and disinforming unknowingly or knowingly?
I think most of the misinformation is ignorance. I mean, there are lots of cases where there's deliberate fake news sent out. But a lot of times is just ignorance. Like somebody, because you hear 3 voting booths ran out of paper in Elisenheim or Finkelstein or wherever, you just suddenly write Windhoek is out of papers, because you don't realize there are like other 1,000 booths around or 600 booths around in Windhoek or in Commerce. And at a stage they said even Commerce ran out of paper. And I think that's something only ECN can come out and say, and they didn't do that part of it. But apart from that, I feel, as much as people put in the effort, that misinformation did discourage a lot of people, because you're waiting in queue and suddenly you see they're out of paper. Then you don't know whether you should wait or not. Then the cutoff time information where people said, okay, at 9 o'clock, the polling booth might close. There was no clear indication from ECN to say, you can vote as long as you are in the queue, you'll be allowed to vote. Even though it's in the ECN regulations, there was no statement from them. Only after 9:15, I think, the statement came out, which also people had left by then.
And it was only given to certain media houses, so to one media house. I want to compare, because I want to compare us to the US. Of course, they've got a bigger population, we've got a smaller one, and comparing the voting time, and also I'm sure the US has had a lot of time to get that right, the election. But what's your take in terms of where we can improve? Someone was saying, Dr. Lea Kihangala, for example, very prominent member of the society, he tweeted, can't we just digitize this whole thing, vote? And I even asked you yesterday afternoon, would it be prone to hacking? Could a similar approach perhaps work?
Look, sometimes it takes an incident like this to realize the value of going digital. We were digital. 2014 elections, 2019 elections, we were digital. We used machines from India where they've used it for, I think in India this year they had 1.2 million voting booths, all digital. And average time in India is still less than, I think it was less than 20 minutes to vote, even because it was split up over a few days or few weeks. The thing is, last 2 elections, the opposition parties went to the Supreme Court to complain against their voting machines. And I think that's where ECN was caught off guard, because last time we used papers was 2009. And this is a whole new generation of people running ECN, and I don't think they had a clue what's in store. because people didn't know why is there a pencil, for example.
Yeah.
That's also part of information flow that they should have told people this is what the process is going to be like. There will be a pencil. Now people are saying pencil is wrong because it can be erased, but the whole world uses pencil.
So it's voter education.
It's voter education, and especially because it's different than the last two votes, we need to keep that in mind and tell people like what to expect with this. And also the times, like a few observers, election observers that I asked, I'm like, what can you tell me about what you observed? They're like, look, average time they said in Windhoek and Swakopmund per voter is 5.5 minutes. That's like 11 voters an hour. That's way too long. In most countries, it's a few seconds. Everything is digitalized. You go in, even if it's a paper ballot. Still, the processes before that are digitalized and they work. We had issues of the machines, voter identification machines. They were heating up, malfunctioning. There was not enough testing done, and then we conduct these elections with these electronic machines in the middle of the summer under a tent in Namibia. So that does impact.
Yeah, they're going to heat up.
Yes.
What would be the takeaway lesson here? What have we learned in terms of not only the process, streamlining the process, but also the digital aspect of things and the misinformation and how people were expressing themselves? And I think there's a bit of a positive to it as well.
But there's a lot of positive that came out on the stories we heard on how people were helping each other. People were being served food while waiting at the Lady Pohamba Hospital. Fruit and veg, the Food Lovers Market came and gave everybody free food. There are lots of positive stories. But at the end of the day, this is about the future of the country. It's democracy. It's everybody's right to vote. And I think that's where, while we have all these positives, we need to learn from this. We need to make drastic changes in the digitalization of it, moving forward with what we've learned. How are we going to implement newer processes? And especially next year is also the local and regional elections. Everything happened now should not be repeated. That's just going to make it worse.
Before we head on to next year, let's talk about now. The results are bound to come out.
Yes.
Some were saying, I know you were saying last time we had a manual sort of non-electronic voting process. It took 7 days. What are some of your expectations, as well as once you get those numbers in as a digital strategist? How do you plan on presenting those numbers, making them more palatable for our audience?
So the big challenge here is because we have 2,400 booths, each having two results, one for presidential, so we're looking at 4,800 result sheets. So obviously there'll be a lot of fake sheets, manipulated sheets. There's already a sheet from one of the constituencies in Irongo where it's two sheets, same name, same number, same signatures. I mean, it's not a copy. It looks like two different sheets, but the results are different.
Wow.
So how do I identify? Because you don't know where to go to verify those things. And as media houses, it becomes very difficult to use those numbers now to create a results page, even if it's preliminary, because you're getting a lot of fake information out there. So I think that will become a big challenge. And like we said, 2009, it took us 6-7 days to count. We've got a lot more voters now, so it's going to take a lot more to consolidate everything. What we hear this morning, somebody posted on the page, was a lot of election officials, electoral officials and party officials are stuck in the tents and in a booths. They're not allowed to leave because now the results are there with them and they have to wait for the official processes to take place. So people are trying to figure out how to get these people out.
I also want to talk about, obviously that's going to take some time. I also want to talk about what our viewers should look out for in terms of mis and disinformation and fake news when the results come out. What are some of the key signs that show something's wrong here? Of course, we're always told, go to the ECN. They are the official body that's responsible for that. But in case something pops up online, what can I look out for?
Ideally, try not to share it. Because you don't know where it comes from. Even as a media house, we are reluctant to share something we get on WhatsApp because we don't know where it comes from. And this is where Electoral Commission's official apps or website, elections.na, does play a big role, but we don't know when they will start uploading official figures there. So until then, the next few days, all we will have is how the voting process went, and all the speculations and the fake results, but we don't know how, if they're verified. So it might give us an indication of where things are, but still it won't be accurate enough because there's, again, like I said, there's 4,800 results. How do you know even from 100 what the outcome will be? Right. So it's quite a small sample rate.
Yeah. You've spoken about the app. I think the ECN does have an app. I'm not sure if it's too active, but they've shared that link with people. With such an app, can it be relied on? You know, a lot of people are very old school in terms of how they receive the results. They'd rather go to print or see something more official. Can some of these apps be relied on?
So ECN has given access to a couple of media houses that I know to tap into their data set to get the results. But as media houses will probably only report from the official result page, which is the ECN website. I don't know, and I haven't heard anything if ECN is planning to distribute or pre-distribute the results to the media houses like they've done in the past sometimes, or have a press conference or something like that before they digitalize it on their dashboard. But it's something that only next 1 or 2 days will tell us how the results are coming up, what ECN is doing about it, what can we do about it in terms of sending the information out, because while we are very eager as a media house to just say, okay, let's hear the results we've received, we also need to have the responsibility around it.
Yeah. Just finally, because social media is always so exciting, and yesterday I was more on Facebook, just keeping tabs on what you were posting, what you were sharing, and not much on Twitter, not much on X. What were some of the more interesting comments you received from Namibians?
A lot of people also commented on the positives, and they said they had a very good experience. And we shouldn't take away from that, because a lot of people, especially the senior citizens who were given preference, it's a good thing that they actually had a way to, vote early. But there were also complaints like they were not equipped, voting booths were not equipped for physically handicapped. So a lot of people in wheelchairs couldn't make it, and they were turned away. And that's something nobody has addressed. Like people with disability, something they should have planned for. Apart from that, I think it was a public holiday. People did have, while they were in the queue, they had a good time. I think one of the positives is, I think in few hours you run out of battery, so you're forced to socialize with everyone and do small talk and
switch off your gadgets.
Switch off your gadgets. So I think there's a lot to learn from it, and hopefully we'll be well prepared for the next ones.
All right, as we wrap up, what are you working on? How are you going to sort of approach these results coming in on your desk right now? I know you're always thinking, you're always planning.
We are trying something, but we'll see throughout the day, like the dashboard that we have for Future Media, the elections dashboard. We are trying to get more live updated feeds to it, and hopefully by end of the day we might have some results being shown there that are verified.
All right, thank you, Nrupesh.
So thanks a lot.
All right, thank you for watching. That was Nrupesh Soni. He's our Future Media digital strategist, speaking to us about the aspect of social media and the role social media played in this year's election. I know there were a lot of comments, but go to our pages, Future Media News, One Africa, Radio Wave, all the radio stations, and you can also get extra information on that, as well as our website, www.futuremedianews.com.na/elections. There's a dashboard. Go and have a look at all the information you'll have access to. Stay tuned.
Election Overview.